In general manager Omar Khan, Steelers Nation trusts. So what team remaking magic will the con artist pull off in the NFL draft? Welcome to the Steelers update from PennLive, where we keep track of all things Steelers, so you don't have to. This is John Lucy reporting. Omar Khan has taken Steelers Nation by storm. Pittsburgh's general manager will be pulling the strings on just his second NFL draft, but he's already a legend in the 412 area code. He has his own nickname, the Con Artist, and it was coined by his admiring colleague, who just happens to be the Steelers head coach, Mike Tomlin. The legion of black and gold fans, affectionately known as Yinzers, love their chants. In the stands at Acrisure Stadium, their constant mantra is, "Here we go, Steelers." But during free agency and throughout the upcoming NFL draft, they'll replace that with another now familiar phrase. In Khan, we trust. Indeed, Khan's 23 months since being appointed and anointed the Steelers GM following Kevin Colbert's post-2022 draft retirement has been a masterclass of maximizing return and minimizing risk. Khan set the tone for his eyebrow-raising, now cheer-inducing tenure when he sent underperforming receiver Chase Claypool packing to Chicago in return for the Bears' second-round pick in the 2023 draft. That selection turned to gold as the Bears kept losing and the pick kept trending upward. When all was said and done, it settled at number 32. Technically a first rounder since the Patriots had to forfeit their selection. With it, Khan brought Joey Porter Jr., the Penn State cornerback with a Steelers legacy, back home. It became the highlight of a stellar Steelers draft that produced contributors, if not starters, across the board. It helped propel the 2023 team into the playoffs. Now Khan's overriding goal is to add enough talent to take the 2024 team a step further, actually winning a postseason game for the first time in 7 insufferable seasons. It would be the first step to what used to be the default Steelers mindset for every season, winning a Super Bowl. With every move, Khan carries the hopes and desires of Steelers Nation close to his heart. Don't take my word for it. Here's Khan's quote, "I owe it to Steelers Nation to do everything I can to try to get to the Super Bowl. Every decision we make, that we talk about, is based on that," unquote. If anyone doubted Khan's win now mindset, second guessers were quickly dispelled over St. Patrick's Day weekend. In a stunning series of moves, Khan brought in not one, but 2 possible starting quarterbacks, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And he swept away his predecessor's mistake, sending Colbert's 2022 first-round pick, Kenny Pickett, off to warm the bench in Philadelphia. This after the Pitt quarterback was revealed not as Pittsburgh's prodigal son, but an entitled whiner who really didn't want to compete after Wilson got the starter's nod from Tomlin. Best of all, Khan did it all at bargain basement prices. This in a league where the going rates for quarterbacks are in the $35 million a season range. Combined, these 2 quarterbacks won't cost the Steelers close to $10 million. I mean, not even close to that. Khan's big kahuna moves had all of Steelers Nation buzzing. Optimism reigned once again in Pittsburgh. He put fans and foes alike on notice that nothing was off the table anymore for the Steelers. Khan goes big, and he doesn't go home. He just comes back for more. Now, the NFL draft awaits, and the Steelers have 3 huge needs in a big play-starved offense that hasn't produced much of anything since the waning days of Big Ben Roethlisberger. The Steelers require a blue-chip right tackle that would allow last year's number 1, Broderick Jones, to return to his natural position at left tackle. They are in desperate need of a long-term answer at center, where the legacy in Pittsburgh looms large. I'm talking about Mike Webster, Dermontti Dawson, and Marquise Pouncey, who's the next name in that center pedigree in Pittsburgh. But perhaps above all, and I know not everyone thinks this is above all, but I do, the Steelers must grab a reliable wide receiver to pair with third-year star-in-the-making George Pickens, who has plenty of talent, but also plenty of potential problems that he could bring to this locker room. So we got to watch him very closely for all his splash plays that I think he can make, but also for any splashes of problems that develop with his attitude and effort. Now, why a receiver? You say, well, because it's all part of the grand experiment at quarterback that Khan has already orchestrated. Right now, the Steelers don't know if they have 2 starters at the NFL's most important position or none. But they must figure this out in 2024. Providing Wilson and Fields with an embarrassment of riches at the pass-catching position is the surest path toward an answer, a definitive answer. And this answer will guide the franchise's future. They'll either sign Wilson, Fields, or both long-term, or they'll be back to the QB drawing board in 2025. Given that Khan's grandiose QB gambit is on the line, we can all trust that he has a plan at receiver. Will it be a blockbuster trade or an unexpectedly high draft pick that settles this position? Well, we won't know that until it happens. Surely, though, the low-key Khan, who previously handled the Steelers' salary cap for years, is not going to tip his hand in advance. Quote, I don't ever necessarily consider myself or describe myself as aggressive, unquote. Khan said that earlier this offseason, following some of his most aggressive moves. But the way Khan sees it is this, quote, we're going to keep plugging away, unquote. Rest assured, that means he'll keep plugging playmakers into the Steelers' 2024 lineup, both with his upcoming draft picks and the still more trades and free agent signings that are sure to come as well. Above all, you can trust the con artist, and you can trust that he has a splash play up his sleeve that will provide his hand-picked pair of QBs with their best opportunity to deliver splash plays on the field. I'm talking about a receiver in this receiver-rich draft. I know there's been talk of trades for Brandon Ayuk, but I think you get your maximum return. Again, maximum return at your lowest risk and your lowest cost, just picking one in this receiver-rich draft. Khan's play at pass catcher, whatever it is, should have all of Steelers Nation cheering again. And what will they cheer? In Khan, we trust. And if this works, those chants will continue all season long. We have much more on what the con artist could do in the draft, including various intriguing scenarios for an eye-popping draft day trade. It's all in this draft countdown edition of your Steelers Update podcast. Hey, and be sure to catch my full print column first thing Thursday on Penn Live. As always, it will be packed with plenty of memes, bringing all the best Steelers draft debates to life and to laughs. Right now, let's get right to it. So what shrewd draft move will Khan come up with next to stun Steelers Nation into another stupor of excitement for the coming season? For some mind-blowing possibilities, we turn to Steelers beat reporter Mark Kaboly with The Athletic. He tells us that crafty Khan is probably up to something big. After all, he is the con artist, right? So what should we expect come draft day, this time next Thursday? Well, Kaboly gives us some various scenarios, writing this, quote, "Not known for their movement up or back in the draft, the Steelers went in a different direction last year under Khan in his first draft, where he moved up 3 spots in the first round to draft Broderick Jones, acquiring the 32nd pick that turned into Joey Porter Jr. from the Bears the year prior by trading Chase Claypool, and he dropped 13 spots in the third round to be able to get tight end Darnell Washington and pick up Nick Herbig later in the draft. With Khan having 9 trades under his leadership in 23 months in a league that has small windows to trade, with an organization that has tended to be more conventional with its approach, anything and everything is on the table. Given that the Steelers have significant holes at significant positions that may not be able to be filled immediately with a draft pick, it's quite likely that the con artist will make a draft move or two to upgrade the roster, unquote. So that's how Kaboly sets it up, sets the table for Khan to pull his magic. So what could he pull off come draft day? Well, Kaboly breaks it down into several scenarios, and even while he warns us that some of these may seem highly unlikely, he reminds us, quote, "With Khan, he's shown us time and again that anything and everything is on the table," unquote. So scenario 1, Kaboly says, trading up in round 1. And he writes this, quote, "This is the most likely scenario for the Steelers. Last year, they moved from 20 to 17, and all it cost them was the 140th pick because they pinpointed Jones as within reasonable reach to pull the trigger. The Steelers could find themselves in a similar situation that might result in the same plan," unquote. And why would they do this? Well, Kaboly says this, quote, "It's not a secret the Steelers are interested in a right tackle. The offensive line appears to be the spot where need meets availability at the 20th spot in the draft, which makes it a real possibility they can move up to snag one they want. It would be highly unlikely for them to move up to grab one of their top 3 centers on the board, as they would much prefer one falling to them at 20, or best case scenario, into the second round. Out of all 3 scenarios, moving up in the first round to draft a right tackle has to be at the top," unquote. Now, of course, that's Kaboly's take, and believe me, it is very valid. But for my money, I still believe a top receiver remains on the Steelers' radar. Again, they have to give their new duo of QBs, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, the best possible situation in order to show what they have. That is the question that has to be answered in 2024. So let's see what happens in that first round and what they could be trading up for. Now, there's another scenario that Kaboly outlines, and it's his second scenario, trading down in round 1. could they do that? Well, Kaboly seems to think this is a lot less likely. Quote, they haven't done that since moving back 3 picks from 16 to 19 in 2001, going back to 2001. That's when they drafted Casey Hampton. Of course, that was back when nose tackles in a 3-4 defense weren't necessarily in high demand in the NFL. Now, the Steelers in 2024 are in a win-now mode. Trading back in the draft isn't a win-now move. With Khan's reputation of making things happen, it would be highly unlikely that an extra 4th-round pick would be worth moving down a couple of slots in round 1, unquote. Hey, I agree with Kaboly 100% right here. Khan, with this QB gambit that he's pulled off and some of the other moves that he's brewing, and no doubt a splash play to pull up from his sleeve at wide receiver, trading down doesn't make a lot of sense in the first round. Now, maybe in the middle rounds of this draft, something could come up. We'll see, where he can pocket, an extra pick that he could turn into another Herbig, as we mentioned before, but we'll see on that. What is the other possible scenario? We go back to the big guy one last time for Kaboly's 3rd draft scenario, trading for a receiver. Kaboly says, quote, if there's one glaring need for the Steelers, it is at wide receiver. They have a burgeoning superstar in the form of George Pickens, but not much of anything after him. The draft is loaded with receiver talent, but if you aren't taking one in the first round, the first-year impact usually isn't much. It's a foregone conclusion that the Steelers will add a veteran receiver at some point, with the draft being one of the 3 sweet spots during the calendar year to make a trade, the cut-down day and trade deadline being the others. You can't overlook the possibility of packaging a player and a pick for a wide receiver, unquote. Again, you know where I sit. With this draft as loaded as it is with top pass-catching playmakers, I think Pittsburgh makes a play for one of those guys. It is a target-rich environment, and Omar Khan is eyeing up those targets. I just kind of feel it. Crafty Khan has his eye on one of those guys. Could it be Texas stud Adonai Mitchell, who's an Adonis at the position? Now that move would put Steelers Nation into a Khan-crazed frenzy. I, for one, would love to see it. Now, Kaboly in that column for The Athletic goes over some more Khan-fueled scenarios, and I highly urge you to read the piece in order to prepare yourself for the player personnel phenomenon that is RGM Omar Khan and all that he is capable of. But right now we move on and we check in on the latest news and notes about the draft from 2 Steelers insiders with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm talking about Ray Filipaldo and his colleague Brian Batko. These 2 allow Yinzers to pick their fact-packed brains on a regular basis in their weekly online chat sessions. And I've called both of their latest chats for the most juicy morsels of information. So here goes. First up, Filipaldo, who fielded a lot of questions about Duke O-lineman Graham Barton. Barton is in for a visit in Pittsburgh, one of the many offensive linemen the Steelers have brought in to kick the tires on, but not all of the Yinzers who took part in the chat were crazy about the prospect of Pittsburgh taking Barton. He's a 313-pounder at pick 20, who they would plan to convert to center. Now, the Vegas odds are predicting the Steelers will pick Barton as their center. Again, it would require that controversial conversion to the position, and it became a main topic of conversation in that Phil chat. Now, here's some of the columnist's choice thoughts on Barton. Quote, "Why are we comparing Kendrick Green and Graham Barton?" Filipaldo asks, referring to the Steelers' failed third-round experiment at center, who ruined Big Ben Roethlisberger's final season with the Steelers. Green was a third-round pick, and it's looking like Barton is a first-rounder, so let's not compare them, Filipaldo demanded, and then went on to write this, quote, "They'd be taking Barton as a center, not a tackle, so I understand the position switch thing, but it happens more than you think with offensive linemen. Just look at Broderick Jones. He had no experience at right tackle and played well there for the most part as a rookie." That's good points by Filipaldo, who seems to be making a case for Barton. As for why Barton is making a late charge up draft boards and seemingly unseating Oregon's Jackson Powers Johnson as the top player at the position, well, readers wanted to know why. And Filipaldo says this, quote, "I think sometimes we get too caught up in what the so-called draft experts are saying. I think the more people get information about what teams are actually thinking, it's revealed who actually are the top players at their positions. And really, if you look at Barton, he's consistently been a late first or early second round guy. Now he's just climbing into the conversation for the Steelers. It's not that big of a jump," unquote. Well, Steelers Nation, there you have it. A lot of talk about the Steelers going Graham Barton at pick 20 to be their Steelers center. But does he have what it takes to hold down that all-important position for the next decade? Can he match the considerable tradition at this position established by the likes of Mike Webster, Damani Dodson, and Marquise Pouncey? Or is Omar Khan about to stumble into a first-round disaster for your Steelers? Say it isn't so. We shall see. Well, we know how Brian Batko feels about the Steelers draft. He just spelled it out in his reader chat column for that same Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And the highlight of the chat with Bats, well, what caught my eye was an astute reader question about balancing some of the glaring needs for the Steelers in this draft. Would it be better to wait on a wide receiver or a right tackle? Hey, you know where I stand. I think a top receiver adds more to this team and helps these incoming QBs. But Batko, he has other thoughts, and he writes this, quote, "I think the reason I'd be comfortable waiting on wide receiver more than offensive tackle is because not only do you have a number one in George Pickens, but you just have more options in that group in general than you do at tackle. Quez Watkins and Van Jefferson weren't the kind of big-name additions Steelers fans were hoping for, I know, but they're legit NFL guys. And personally, I'm still bullish on Calvin Austin III. At offensive tackle, you have the two returning starters and then Spencer Anderson and Dylan Cook. You have to address that or center before wide receiver, in my most humble opinion," unquote. As for the player Batko predicts for Pittsburgh at pick 20, quote, "I guess for right now, I'd say a guy who has checked the most pre-draft boxes, and that would be Armarius Mims from Georgia," unquote. And certainly Mims has been linked to the Steelers in a number of mock draft. But Batco put out a hypothetical mock draft for the Post-Gazette that plays out a scenario where Khan and company have their virtual pick from among several top wide receivers, several tackles, and several centers, all at selection 20. Now, I urge you to check out all the details in the Post-Gazette of this hypothetical mock draft where everything falls Steelers' way. But I give you a taste here of Batco's not-so-batty scenario. He writes this: in this mock, we work up a first round that plays into Omar Khan's hands. Basically, that means plenty of top offensive tackles, wide receivers, and even a center still available to the Steelers by the time they're on the clock. Is it far-fetched for only 2 offensive linemen to go before number 20? Well, probably. But this is the ideal first round for the Steelers, and it's not as if the players taken instead are obvious reaches. The only downside to this would be the challenge of identifying the best right tackle in the draft or choosing between that guy and the highest rated center, unquote. Of course, that's a decision Khan would love to have. And of course, as I would argue, among those choices at 20 in this draft would be some pretty tempting wide receivers as well, because they fall as well in this Batco draft scenario. But of course, that's hypothetical. It's all been speculation up to this point, all rumors and innuendo, if you will. So how will the real draft board fall, and who will hold up that number 1 Steelers jersey on Thursday night? We're just a week away, Steelers fans, and I feel your 412 area code excitement building from way out here in Harrisburg. What will our Khan artist pull off for 2024? Hey, we're going to be covering all the last-minute rumors and some final predictions in next Wednesday's show, right before the draft gets underway. And once all of Pittsburgh picks are set for real, we will spend a series of podcast episodes diving deep on all the new slate of Steelers rookies and what they will bring to this still developing 2024 team. In other words, guys, some exciting times and some scintillating episodes lie ahead for your Steelers Update podcast. So you make a move and do what you need to do to get the podcast automatically delivered to your inbox every Wednesday afternoon. Just sign up for our podcast wherever you get your favorite audio. And of course, log on to PennLive anytime for your real-time Steelers news.